The morning Owen finally read the note, he understood that the most important things in his life had never announced themselves. They had simply waited, folded small, on the corner of a pillow. Owen Calloway was 38 years old, a furniture restorer who worked out of a converted garage on the east side of the city. He stripped old wood, reset joints, refinished surfaces that other people had given up on. He was good at it in the quiet, methodical way that comes from doing something long enough that you stop thinking about it and just do it. He had been divorced for 3 years, not bitterly, not dramatically. The marriage had ended the way a radio signal fades when you drive too far from the station, gradually, then completely, without anyone deciding anything. He had the garage, a 2-bedroom apartment he'd never quite finished decorating, and a shelf of paperbacks he kept meaning to read. He was not unhappy. He was the way a room gets when nobody's opened the windows in a while. Still, slightly stale, functional. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, and for 14 months the second one had belonged to Nora Vance. She had answered his listing on a Tuesday in October, the year before, carrying a canvas bag over one shoulder and a small box of books under her arm. She was 34, a junior architect at a firm downtown that specialized in adaptive reuse. Old buildings turned into something new. She had dark hair she kept pulled up badly, paint on the sleeve of her gray sweater, and the kind of quiet assurance that doesn't perform itself. She looked at the room, asked 2 practical questions about the water pressure and the parking, and said she'd take it. Owen had expected more negotiation. There wasn't any. She moved in the following Saturday. For the first 2 months they were polite strangers. She kept her hours, he kept his. Coffee was made in shifts. The kitchen was a relay race. She worked late 3 nights a week and left early on Fridays. He came in from the garage smelling like sawdust and mineral spirits and tried not to track shavings past the doormat. It was orderly, respectful, unremarkable. Then one November evening she came home to find him in the kitchen at 10 o'clock, standing at the counter with a cracked chair rail, a wood file, and an expression of total concentration, and she sat down at the table with her laptop in her takeout container and worked beside him for 2 hours without either of them saying much at all. When she packed up to go to bed, she paused at the doorway and said, "You hum when you work. I don't think you know you do it." Owen looked up. She was already gone. He stood there for a minute, listening to himself. She was right. He hadn't known. After that, things became something different. Not romantic, not yet, but alive in a way the apartment hadn't been. They started sharing the kitchen at the same time instead of taking turns. She made coffee strong enough to resurface a deck, and he didn't complain. He cooked on Sundays, nothing elaborate, just soup or pasta or a roast that filled the whole place with the smell of garlic and thyme, and she ate at the counter with her drawings spread out, occasionally asking him to look at something and tell her if it read as a wall or a window. He never had the right vocabulary, but she said his answers were useful anyway. She said most people only looked at what was obviously there. She said he looked for what the thing was trying to be. 14 months passed this way, small domestic accumulations. Her blue umbrella in the hall, his coffee mug on her side of the sink, left there by accident, never corrected. A running joke about the building's elevator, which made a sound on the 4th floor that Owen had described once as a dying accordion, and which Nora now referenced every single time without ever laughing at it, just stating it the way you state a fact of geography. What Owen did not know for most of those 14 months was that her move-in had not been clean. She had come from a broken engagement, a man named Daniel, an attorney, composed and certain in the particular way of people who have decided they know what they deserve. The engagement had lasted 2 years. The unraveling had taken 4 months and had been conducted entirely in the language of practicality, which is the coldest dialect of heartbreak. Daniel had not been cruel. He had simply decided she was a variable he no longer wanted to account for. She had packed her things into a storage unit, slept on her sister's couch for 3 weeks, and found Owen's listing on a Tuesday in October. She was not recovering dramatically. She was doing what she always did with a damaged structure, assessing load-bearing capacity, deciding what could stay. Owen only learned this in pieces. The engagement came out at the kitchen table one evening in March, casually, the way big things often surface. She mentioned Daniel's name in the context of a restaurant she was avoiding, and when Owen asked who Daniel was, she told him in the same flat, informational tone she used to describe zoning regulations. She didn't invite sympathy. He didn't offer any. He said it sounded like the ending had been a long time coming. She looked at him for a moment and said yes. She supposed it had been. Then she went back to her drawing, and he went back to his book, and neither of them said anything more about it, but something had shifted, the way a piece of furniture becomes different when you understand what it was originally made for. It was a Saturday in early December when things cracked open, though cracked is the wrong word. Opened is closer. The heat in the apartment went out sometime around midnight, and Owen was in the hallway in a sweatshirt at 1 in the morning trying to read the boiler panel with a flashlight when Nora appeared at her door in a heavy cardigan wrapped in a throw blanket, holding her mug of cold tea and squinting. "Is it fixable tonight?" she asked. He said he didn't know. She said, "Come sit by the oven. I'll turn it on for warmth." He said that was a terrible idea, structurally. She said she knew, but she was cold, and sometimes bad ideas were the warm ones. He followed her to the kitchen. They sat at the table for an hour and a half while the oven took the edge off and the cold made the windows opaque. She told him about her first real project at the firm, a warehouse in the industrial district being converted to low-income housing, and how one of the senior partners had presented her section of the plans to a client without her name on them, and how she had not said anything at the time and had been angry at herself since for the silence. Owen listened. He said, "Why didn't you say something?" She wrapped the blanket tighter and said, "Because it would have made it a thing, and I didn't want it to be a thing." He said, "It already was a thing. You just let him decide whose thing it was." She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You're annoyingly clear sometimes," she said. He said he'd take that. She smiled, not her polite smile, the real one, the one that went all the way to the corners, and they stayed at that table until the heat came back on at 2:15. The thing about living closely with someone is that the ordinary moments do more work than you realize at the time. It is not the long conversations or the declared feelings, it is the accumulated weight of 1,000 unremarkable instances. The way she always moved his jacket off the chair to sit down, but always folded it first, the way he always bought 2 of the yogurt she liked without remarking on it, the way she had started, somewhere around month 9, to knock on his workshop door on quiet evenings instead of going to bed alone. These things had been happening. Owen knew they had been happening. He had been watching them happen the way you watch weather approach across a flat landscape, aware of it, not moving. In January, she told him the lease was ending. She had been offered a position at a larger firm in Portland, the kind of offer that arrives once and does not wait. She was going. She told him on a Thursday evening, standing in the kitchen doorway with her jacket still on and her bag on her shoulder, as if she had debated whether to come all the way inside before saying it. Owen said congratulations. He said it was a good firm. He'd looked them up. She blinked. She said she hadn't told him the firm's name. He said he'd looked up a few. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You always do things quietly," and went to her room. Owen stood in the kitchen for a long time after. The kettle went cold on the burner without him noticing. The last 2 weeks were a particular kind of strange, not distant, almost more present than usual, sharper, the way cold air sharpens everything. She had boxes in the hallway. He helped her tape them. He did not offer to help her move to Portland. She did not ask. They ate dinner together every night that week, takeout mostly, cartons spread across the coffee table, the television on low and neither of them watching it. On her last evening, she packed the final box and stacked it with the others by the door, and then came and sat beside him on the couch, close enough that their arms were touching, and they watched the last 20 minutes of a documentary about ocean currents neither of them had turned on intentionally. When it ended, she said goodnight. Owen said, "Drive safe tomorrow." She said she would. He did not hear her leave. She went early, before 6, before his alarm. He lay in bed listening to the building's particular silence and the difference in it, the way a room changes pressure when someone stops being in it. He got up eventually, made coffee. The kitchen was clean. Her mug was gone from the wrong side of the sink. He stood there a while, not moving. Then he went to make his bed and found the note. It was a folded piece of the heavy drafting paper she used for her sketches, the good stuff, creamy and slightly textured. His name written on the outside in her handwriting, precise, the kind of letters that knew exactly where they were going. It was tucked between the pillow and the case, square and deliberate. She had put it there on purpose. She had made sure he would find it. He held it for a long time. He did not open it. He made coffee. He went to the garage. He worked on a credenza for 4 hours, stripped the old finish, sanded it smooth, rebuilt the drawer joint on the left side that someone had tried to fix decades ago with wood glue and wishful thinking. He worked with the radio on low, and the shop door cracked and the winter light coming in flat and gray across the bench. He did not open the note. He was afraid of what careful was, when careful was just the name you gave to fear. At 1:45 he came back inside, sat at the kitchen table, her side of the kitchen table, and unfolded the paper. She had drawn it first. A small floor plan, just a few lines. The kitchen table, the counter, the window, 2 chairs. His chair was labeled with a tiny O, hers with N. Below the drawing, in her architect's hand, she had written 4 sentences. Owen read them. He read them again. He sat there for a while in the apartment that was all his now and had more space in it than he knew what to do with. The sentences were, "I've been trying to figure out what this place actually is, and I think it's the only home I've had in a long time. I know you know that. I'm telling you anyway because you'd never tell yourself. Come find me before I stop being findable." Owen sat with those sentences until the light changed. Then he got up, went to the garage, cut the power to the credenza, and started looking up the drive to Portland. He called ahead. She picked up on the third ring and said, "You opened it." He said he had. She said, "What took you?" He said he wasn't sure. She said, "Yes, you are." He said, 7 hours. She said, "I'll add it to your file." He asked her not to. She said she made no promises. She said the firm didn't start until March, and she was staying in a furnished apartment near the waterfront, and the windows faced west, and the light in the evening was the kind that made you want to draw everything you could see before it changed. He said that sounded like a good place to see. She said, "Well then, come see it." He said he would. The drive took 5 hours and 40 minutes. She was at the door when he pulled up, in the gray sweater, hair clipped up badly, the same as the first day. He got out of the truck and they stood on the sidewalk, and she said, "For the record, the windows are exactly as good as I said." He said he'd withhold judgment. She said that was fair. He took one step closer, and she did not step back, and she said quietly, "I was starting to think you were going to let this be the kind of thing that just doesn't happen." Owen looked at her. He said, "I was." She said, "What changed?" He said, 4 sentences on a piece of good paper." She reached up and took his face in both hands the way you take something you've been careful with for a long time and are finally done being careful about, and she kissed him, there on the sidewalk in the cold, with the February light going flat and gold behind the waterfront buildings. 6 months later, Owen moved his operation to Portland. He found a workshop space in the same industrial district where Nora was converting the old cannery building into a community arts center. Her design, her name on the plans, front page. He stripped and refinished a set of reading room tables for the building's main hall as a wedding gift to the project. She came by the workshop the evening he finished the last one and ran her hand along the surface and said, "You kept the grain." He said the grain was the whole point. She said she knew. She looked at him across the table and said, "I need to ask you something." He said after Portland he felt like he should be nervous. She said he probably should. She said, "Are you always this careful?" He said it depended what he was trying not to break. She didn't answer right away. When she looked back up, her expression had changed all the way. She said, "Well then, don't break this." He said he had no intention of it. They were married the following spring in her sister's backyard on a Saturday in April, under string lights, and a sky that couldn't decide between blue and gray and settled on both. Her sister's dog wandered through the ceremony and sat squarely on Owen's foot during the vows, and did not move. Nora laughed so hard she had to pause. Owen held her hand and waited. The officiant waited. Everyone waited. When she caught her breath, she looked at him and said, "Still want to?" He said yes. She said, "I thought so." 2 years after that, their apartment in Portland had the particular smell of a place that has become the settled version of itself. Coffee from the good beans she bought on Fridays, the faint mineral spirits from his jacket hung by the door, old cedar from the bookcase he'd made from salvaged wood the winter before. The windows faced west. The light in the evening was exactly as good as she had said. He came home on a Thursday to find her at the kitchen table with her drawings spread out, and he stood in the doorway for a moment before she knew he was there. She was humming. She didn't know she did it. He had never told her. He had learned it from living with someone who showed him, without saying so, that the careful distance between two people was not safety. It was just the space that hadn't been crossed yet. Sometimes careful is only fear with better manners. So here is what Owen wants to know from you. What would you have done if you found a note that someone left for you, and you were afraid to open it? Would you have waited 7 hours or longer, or not at all? And have you ever known that a moment was important while it was still happening and let yourself look away from it anyway? Tell Owen your story in the comments below. If this one meant something to you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and he'll see you in the next one.